So I've been doing reviews of the Nostalgia Critic reviews all this month to kind of follow him doing the Spider-Man month where he reviews every Spider-Man movie from the 3 Sam Raimis and the 2 Mark Webbs, and doesn't get into the MCU or Spider-Verse, although they refer to them a lot. This is the final one that I'm doing of him. I might be doing, again, like, I expect him to do something embarrassing later. I'm sure we'll get another The Wall type thing. Maybe I'll do it then, but you know, it's been fun. I actually kind of find going through him interesting because it kind of shows me his strengths and his weaknesses. And it was also interesting seeing how he even deals with his employees during coronavirus. Because the last one he had nobody in. This one he has his other cast members in. And understanding like his charity stuff he does. Understanding him in a little bit of a different way. I do end up talking about him a bit. And it seems like people want me to talk about him. If he does another Spider-Verse month, maybe we'll talk about it. But we'll see. I don't think he has enough stuff. Probably will stop talking about him after this on the regular. But thank you if you watch this. I know people like me talking about Nostalgia Critic. I don't know if I love talking about him, but sure. People seem to dig it, so whatever. But I think this is it. This is it for a bit. Probably till like December when I talk about something else. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think the thing about Amazing Spider-Man 2, it's definitely the worst Spider-Man movie. Is it worse than the infamous Spider-Man 3? Not really. No, it is. Sorry. Is it worse than Spider-Man 3? It is. But the other reason it's worse than Spider-Man 3 is Spider-Man 3 is funny. There's memes. We can see somebody do the dance. We can, we share it. We laugh about it. We talk about, hey, maybe this could have worked. Thomas Hayden Church was alright. There's like interesting things. It's a discussion movie. Certain movies are fun to talk about despite their quality. Spider-Man 3 is one of those. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is not. And that's sort of the problem with this. Now, I think Doug really had to find a way to make this interesting. And his whole theory on this one has more of a whole crux of like the cast members and like is more similar to his Spider-Man 3 review in that he uses the cast members. Spider-Man 1, it seemed like he just wanted to be by himself. Whether that was because of COVID or not, that's just me theorizing. I really don't know. But it's not a bad theory, let's say. First, he has this Toonami thing at the beginning, which was like an April Fool's joke, which is the one guy wearing the Toonami guy's suit and stuff. That was all right, I will say, Nathaniel Foga. Whatever. It was kind of like a random, like, hey, nostalgia, and that was it. I did notice he very much is trying to kind of claim, and a lot of people through this one, that there's kind of moments that could have been something. I have never bought that, and I don't believe that, and I think they're just kind of grasping at straws to explain it's kind of subpar movie that was like whatever, and sort of like acting like, but if we had made a better sequel to that, we would have liked these movies. I'm like, no, they're like mild at best, so like whatever. He even claims a certain point where like Spider-Man is wearing like, he's in the Spider-Man suit and he's wearing like, a hat, a hoodie, and all this stuff that was right out of Spider-Verse. I'm like, I guess, but not really. And then they have the whole idea with the Lady Doc Ock from Spider-Verse, and she makes a humanized version of the movie Amazing Spider-Man 2. And he's like complaining, like, look, there's parts that are good and all this stuff. But I think the problem with this, again, is like, you're sort of like, this movie is such a mess. You're sort of just overly explaining like everything that doesn't work about it, but it's not funny. It's not fun, and I think the Nostalgia Critic, like the best one of these of the reviews was Spider-Man 3 because there's a lot to joke about. There's meme potential. He's ready to go with it, and in this, it's just kind of like sort of sad because like even I will admit this is a major step down for these films. Huge step down. Like remarkable. Horrible step down, like you fell down all of the stairs kind of step down with this movie, and it's like not even fun to go into, so there's not much fun you can really do with it. So I understand why I did this humanized version of Amazing Spider-Man 2. It probably gave him like a little more material and things to cut to. It honestly wasn't that funny, but he does acknowledge that this movie isn't really that great. He kind of brings up kind of the jokes he's been going through this whole series, bringing up the Maguire memes thing a lot, but he keeps bringing up Amazing Spider-Man 1 like he showed potential in it. I never really buy that. It was also interesting as I've gone through that, and then he sort of admits it's the worst Spider-Man movie, and it's kind of like the Doc Ock lady made the humanized version of Spider-Man to like torture a Spider-Man, and she made this fake Spider-Man, and just him reviewing and hating on Spider-Man. But I think one of the things I find odd about the Nostalgia Critic is when he does these bad movies, he really brings up this whole idea of like when he destroys the movie, he really ruins it. And although I think people like AVGN or other critics really go hard on that sort of a thing, Nostalgia Critic never really does. He always does this sort of thing like, well, I'm sort of reasonable, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't go that hard on it, but then like all the actors and the cast members act like he is. And in this, they act like he's going to, even though he admits it's the worst movie, but there's not enough to get excited about. Like, this movie's so bad, you can't really be passionate about it. The only thing you're passionate about is that there are better Spider-Man movies. You're not passionate about your reaction to this other than, dear God, I want it to be over. And it tried to start this whole cinematic universe, which didn't work. It was like all over the place. He does bring up, I will say, Andrew Garfield is actually a very good Spider-Man in this movie. It's probably his best performance as Spider-Man, not Peter Parker, because I don't think he played Peter Parker. He played like Peter, like misunderstood guy or something. It's really stupid. But I don't like this movie. Doug didn't like this movie. I don't think he did an amazing job with this review, but it's sort of a hard film to make a great review of. I've reviewed it before. I reviewed it when it came out. There'll be a card up here when you're seeing this as a video later, and probably on the stream at this point too. If you want to check that out, not like if you're watching it live. But yeah, if someone wants to post that link in there, you can, but it'll be there later. Anyway, sorry. Not to be a total lame person. This kind of comes to the end. It's sort of like this whole month, this review series he did, ends in kind of like a petered out kind of thing, because it's weird because why he didn't have them last time, let's say it's because of COVID, but then he did have them this time. The girl who played Doc Ock was separated from them, but the guy, he is wearing a mask, so it's not like as horrible as like we always hear he's horrible to his employees. It's not the worst. Like it seemed like he tried to, at least like he's wearing a suit. Maybe, you know, they took precautions. I don't know. They're clearly not in New York. I don't know or care where they live. So maybe it's not as bad there, and it's not to the point where it is here. But yeah, I just find this review was sort of like, I think he wanted it a bit to be like the Spider-Man 3 review, which I think was probably one of his better ones recently. And this sort of doesn't really do that, but I wouldn't say, it's hard to make this movie funny. And I think also the problem with this is there's interesting things to say about this movie in terms of context, in terms of all the different movies they have planned. He doesn't bring up the Sinister Six movie. I think it was an interesting series for him to do. I don't think he thought about how good he is at covering certain movies, and I think that sort of hurt this series. If he had just done like the Spider-Man movies he was best at talking about, which is just like the Raimi movies, it seemed like he was more excited for one, but I just didn't care about what he had to say. In this, it just felt like he was like, I have to do this, whatever. And it just sort of peters out at the end, and him kind of coming back with the cast and everything like that. And it was just kind of like, sure, with all that. And then we kind of you just kind of leave it, and hopefully I won't have to talk about him again. I did notice a few people brought up in the comments that apparently he had heard the with great power comes great responsibility from the comics in a different video. And that's kind of my other problem with him, is he reviews a movie in like so many different videos, and it's hard to grab all this info. But it was someone who liked the Nostalgia Critic more. It's not someone I usually have in my comments. It was someone who brought up that he had heard it, but they took my side, basically. And they're not someone who watch my videos normally, or maybe they do. But bringing up that I was right, he didn't act like it came from the comics, but he had heard it before. And that's sort of interesting, that even his fans are like, well, they do know it, but they forgot that. And that's strange to me. He's so inconsistent and so odd, and doesn't use context. I question how he works as a critic, but I was thinking about, when a couple people brought up, could you review Lindsay Ellis's Cats video, which I think is a good video. It goes through the whole history of Cats. I think it's a fairly great Lindsay Ellis video. But she brings up how she's friends with other critics, how she reads other critics, how she reads theory and all these things. And I think of Todd in the Shadows, and I know he reads stuff, and his Rap Critic, which Ryan got me into, and I've been watching. Thank you, Ryan. And even Rocked and all these guys will read and research and understand the context and explain the context, even if it's in a joke. You understood they did a certain amount of research. And I don't get that from the Nostalgia Critic. And I think if I were to, like, let's say for real, we make a lot of jokes, Saber made that joke. What if I were to, like, write for him? I would 100% say, like, put the context in your reviews. He could get to, like, maybe a bit better of a level than he currently is. But he's just trapped in his own stupid context. And let's be honest, that doesn't hold as much water as it used to. And I think that's ultimately, like, if I'm going to have a whole thesis of watching these, his biggest problem is acting like his context and what he is doing is really that great, and not finding a way to back up his argument other than like, yeah, I've seen it and this is my thing and I'm this laid back guy. I just don't think like really works anymore, and it clearly doesn't ultimately work for his reviews, which shows why people are sort of sick of him, why he's embarrassing, and why ultimately he couldn't really come up with a great review for a movie that's pretty unremarkable and terrible in itself.